You're at a gathering with people you know. You're not competing for attention, not steering the conversation, not performing. You're simply there, listening. Then, as the evening winds down, someone leans in close and says it quietly. You know, people find you a little intimidating. You nearly smile. Intimidating. You barely contributed a handful of words the entire night. But it keeps happening. The colleague who starts defending herself before you've finished your question. The guy at the cafe who keeps glancing away when you look in his direction. The friend who confesses months later that she was nervous around you when you first met. And if you're a woman, they'll dress it up differently. They'll say you're a lot, or too guarded, or difficult to get close to. If you're a man, the guys around you will quietly decide you think you're better than everyone. Not because you've ever said so, but because you're not scrambling for their approval the way they expect. Either way, you're left standing there asking yourself the same question. What am I doing wrong? Here's the answer. Nothing. You are not doing a single thing wrong. But you are doing something that most people have never learned how to do, and your ease with it unsettles them. There are 7 distinct patterns behind this. Psychological realities with real names, social triggers you've probably never been able to put into words. Once you recognize them, the way people respond to you will finally make sense. The first one is this. You are comfortable with silence, and that alone is enough to make people uneasy. Most people experience silence as something broken that needs fixing. They'll mention the weather, bring up something they saw online, say almost anything just to keep the air filled. You don't. You wait. You let the quiet sit. And research from social psychology confirms what you've probably observed. Just a few seconds of unbroken silence is enough to make most people physically uncomfortable. Their pulse climbs. They feel like they're being evaluated. They rush to fill the space. But you're not evaluating them at all. You're simply not performing. You're not deploying words as a way to manage the room or prove that you're friendly enough. And when someone senses they can't reach you through small talk, they don't know what to do with that. They'll call you intense afterward. Hard to read. What they're really saying is, I couldn't steer you, and that scared me. The second pattern is stranger, and probably more familiar than you'd like. People tell you things they haven't told anyone else. You're not a counselor. You're not asking probing questions or creating space for confession. But somehow, within the first half hour of a conversation, people are sharing things they've kept buried. The woman you barely know brings up her crumbling marriage. The coworker mentions something he's never said out loud before. It happens often enough that you've stopped being surprised. What's driving it is something psychologists call unconditional positive regard. The rare experience of feeling genuinely heard without being judged, advised, or redirected. When you're fully present in a conversation, not rehearsing your next line, not waiting for your moment to speak, people feel it. Real attention is so uncommon that it becomes magnetic. But here's the part no one warns you about. After someone reveals themselves to you, many will quietly retreat. They'll avoid your eyes the next time they see you. You'll wonder what shifted. What shifted is this. Being truly seen felt like too much. For a lot of people, that kind of witnessing is more frightening than invisibility. The third pattern shows up whenever someone asks for your opinion. You take a moment. You actually think about the question, the layers of it, what it connects to, what it might mean. Before you can finish, someone cuts across you. Come on, don't overthink it. Or, why do you have to make everything so complicated? And you watch their expression tighten slightly. Without a single critical word, you've made them feel like they're standing in a shallow pool while you're wading somewhere deeper. That phrase, you think too much, isn't an observation. It's a reaction. What it actually means is, your depth reminds me of my own surface, and I resent you for it. Social psychology has documented this pattern clearly. People gravitate toward those who process the world at roughly the same level they do. When someone consistently goes deeper, their thoughtfulness stops feeling like a quality and starts feeling like a verdict. The fourth pattern is the one that tends to confuse people most about themselves. When you leave a room, the room changes. Not because you were dominating it. Not because you were the loudest voice or the one holding court. You may have barely spoken, but your absence gets noticed. People ask where you are. They say it wasn't quite the same without you, and they mean it, even if they can't explain why. What's happening is this. Your presence sets a quiet standard. When you're in the room, people are slightly less comfortable with gossip, slightly more careful about what they say and how they say it. Not because you've said anything, just because you're there. Studies on group behavior have shown that even a single calm, observant person in a group shifts how everyone else conducts themselves. People become more considered, more honest, more measured. And yet you're the one in your own head wondering if you're contributing enough, whether you talk too little, whether you even belong. That's the particular irony of this kind of presence. The person the whole room is quietly calibrating itself around is the only one who has no idea. The fifth pattern is one you've probably noticed, but never quite understood. You make a neutral comment. You ask a straightforward question. And suddenly the other person is justifying themselves, explaining their choices, getting defensive about something you never challenged. You mention that you noticed the book on their desk, and they immediately explain why it's worth reading, as if you'd criticized their taste. You ask a clarifying question in a meeting, and the presenter becomes guarded and over-explains. You weren't attacking anyone, but your attention carries a weight you didn't intend and probably don't fully recognize. When someone believes you're actually paying attention, really paying attention, they become aware that you might see what they've been trying not to show. Their reaction has nothing to do with what you said. It has everything to do with what they're afraid you noticed. The sixth pattern runs deeper than most people realize. When someone says something you disagree with, your instinct isn't to immediately push back. You get curious. You ask questions. You want to understand how they arrived at that conclusion, what experience shaped it, what they're actually trying to say. And that willingness to explore rather than win disturbs people who treat every exchange like a competition. Most people need to be right in order to feel secure. When you're more interested in understanding than in scoring the point, you expose that need. You make their defensiveness visible to them. They'll accuse you of playing devil's advocate, of always having to be different. What they mean is, you wouldn't let me stay comfortable in a belief I've never once examined, and I'm angry about it. The seventh pattern is perhaps the most quietly powerful of all. You see what everyone in the room has silently agreed to ignore. The tension that's been sitting at the table all evening. The contradiction in what someone just said. The pattern that's been repeating for months and that no one wants to name. You see it. And even when you say nothing, especially when you say nothing, people sense that you see it. And they can't unsee it themselves anymore. You don't have to speak for the room to shift. Your awareness does the work. That's not aggression. That's not arrogance. That is simply being real in a world that runs largely on performance. Being present when most people are half somewhere else. Being comfortable with depth in spaces that were built for the surface. And nobody tells you the cost of this. People will call you intimidating when what they mean is, you make me uncomfortable with who I am when I'm around you. They'll say you're too intense when what they mean is, you require more honesty than I'm willing to give. Some of it is resentment. They want what you have. The stillness, the self-possession, the ability to sit quietly in yourself without needing to fill the silence with noise. But instead of recognizing it for what it is, they turn it into a flaw they can assign to you. If you're a woman, they won't usually say intimidating to your face. They'll say you're a lot. Too serious. Too opinionated. They'll frame your calm as coldness, your clarity as arrogance, and then suggest you'd be more approachable if you just smiled a little more. If you're a man, the men around you will read your quiet as superiority. Not because you've claimed anything, but because you're not competing with them in the ways they understand. Your stillness makes their noise feel like something to be embarrassed about. Both of these responses come from the same source. Your presence asks something of people they're not accustomed to giving. The loneliness that comes with this is real. You didn't choose it, and you may not even believe you have whatever it is people are responding to. And it costs you the easy kind of belonging. Watching people bond effortlessly over surface-level conversation while you sit there wondering if wanting something more means something is wrong with you. On the nights you stayed home instead of going somewhere that felt hollow, you might have questioned whether you should work harder at being lighter, simpler, less. You shouldn't, because there are people out there who will meet you and for the first time feel like they can exhale. People who won't need you to shrink or perform or fill the silence with something safe. People who will sit with you in the quiet and simply understand it. People who will look at you and say, yes, I see it too. I was somewhere once, sitting alone, certain I was invisible. Someone approached and said their friends had pointed me out, that I seemed unapproachable. This person paused and then said, I think you just look like you're actually paying attention. I had been waiting a long time for someone who could tell the difference. They're out there. They're quieter than the rest. And they're looking for exactly what you are.